divorce, yet God, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you. Yet God in the Old Testament actually calls the religious people whores. So his language is very easy to understand, and there were a lot of insightful things that he said. One of the topics that I've been battling with recently is the topic that Christendom itself is battling with, the recent legalization of gay marriage. And I didn't know whether it was right, whether it was wrong, and he helped me come to my own thinking, my own opinion on that idea. And I really would ask all of you to read this. If you don't have the time to read this book, I ask you to just go listen to that 4-minute spoken word poetry on YouTube. There's this one passage that I really liked, which affected me, and I'd just like to end with that. So when he made the decision to leave behind the traditional following but follow Jesus himself, he found that life became difficult, that Bible actually tells us to do a lot of difficult things. So he went to God in prayer and he said, Lord, life is difficult. Everybody else who follows false belief systems, they are having it easy. Why is life so difficult? It's not fair. And so then he says, again, I heard that inaudible voice, if you want fair, you'll be in hell. So he just hits you with a lot of truths. Like it hits you from out of nowhere. And so I just like to end by saying that this will help anybody who's struggling in their faith and who wants to know what Christianity is. And if you are a Christian and if you're struggling to know what you actually believe in, this is a good place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. Now over to Anne ma'am for her comments.
A good presentation. Can it be applied to all the religions or is it only to Christianity?
It's only for
It cannot be applied the principles that he has presented can be taken out and then be applied to
if you're talking about the idea that religion is only traditions and rules that you follow, then you can apply this. But he's talking about the Christian belief system that we have twisted to fit our own ideologies. But then he says that every religion is basically just rules and traditions that we follow, and we've lost the essence of what we believe.
Valuable comments. Now we move on to the second presenter of the day, Ms. Aparna R. of First MA English, who will be doing a book review of Khaled Hosseini's A Thousand Splendid Suns. Over to Aparna.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ma'am. I chose the book A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This is a historical romance, and it was first published in Great Britain in 2007. The version which I have is published in Bloomsbury Publishing in 2013. This book actually came to me as a friend of mine who kept me occupied during my summer vacations. And it was actually a friend of mine sent me this book as a surprise, and I actually wanted to read this book even before that. So I was so happy to have this book, and I can confidently say that this book never disappointed me. The novel is, this is a historical romance, I already said, and the novel is set in Afghanistan, mainly in Kabul, with the backdrop of the conflict between Soviet Union and Mujahideen, and also the rise and decline of Taliban in Afghanistan. And the plot actually revolves around two heroines, that is Laila and Mariam. These two heroines are represented as victimized, they represent the victimized Afghan women who are silenced by the oppression by patriarchal Afghan society. That patriarchal Afghan society is epitomized by their husband Rashid. I'm not going deeply into the summary, instead I suggest you all to read the book. And the main characters of the book are Mariam, Laila, Tariq, Rashid, Jalil, etc. This is a Bildungsroman novel in 4 parts, and Hosseini has used this stream of consciousness technique in his book, and not the entire text but here and there. And the novel starts programmatically, and it gains its speed and emotional power as we move on. And the characters are all simple characters. And I must say about my favorite character in the novel, that is Mariam. Actually, in author's own words, this is what he says in the novel about Mariam. She never burdened others, never let on that she too had sorrows, disappointments, and dreams that have ridiculed. And also, this is also there in the novel. She was a rock in a riverbed, enduring with complaints. Her grace not sullied without complaints, enduring without complaints. Her grace not sullied but shaped by the turbulence that washed over her. She was a rock in a riverbed. That's what he says. And Mariam is a character who sacrifices her life for Laila. And towards the end, Mariam is in Laila's heart with the bursting radiance of 1,000 suns. That's what Laila thinks about Mariam, with the bursting radiance of 1,000 suns. And one touching scene in the novel is the execution scene of Mariam. That's one scene which I personally felt very bad about, and that's actually the closing line of the third part of the book. And when the Talib asks her to kneel here, Hamshira, and look down, Hosseini writes, one last time Mariam did what she was told. One last time Mariam did what she was told. So from this line we get a lot of meanings. That is, throughout the novel, we see that Mariam always acts according to someone else's commands or orders. And one last time, the only time when she acts according to her will is the only time that which leads her to her execution. I will not say what that is. You should read that yourself. And this is one last time. That's her execution when Mariam did what she was told. And there is another phrase which Hosseini uses in the novel. That's after the marriage of Rashid and Mariam. Rashid walks past Mariam like she was nothing but a house cat. She was nothing but a house cat. So the expression house cat this actually shows how married Afghani women was treated in their society. They were not cared at all, but like nothing but a house cat. And the title of the novel, 1,000 Splendid Suns, was taken from Saïd-e-Tabrizi, a Persian poet's poem, 17th century poem, Kabul. The two lines from the poem is, one could not count the moons that shimmer on her roofs and the 1,000 splendid suns that hide behind her walls. This is from the translation by Dr. Josephine Barry Davis. And the 1,000 splendid suns, the phrase we get from that poem. Laila's father Hakim actually quotes these two lines in the novel. And Hosseini reflects on the women of Kabul with his title, 1,000 Splendid Suns. That is, glowing beauties cloistered in earth and house, hidden from outside world, but nonetheless providing vital, life-giving warmth to the Afghan society, like how sun do. And this novel is actually a reminder for every one of us that all enveloping burqa contains a human being in it. Even Rashid forces Mariam to wear a burqa when she goes out. So all enveloping burqa has a life inside it. That's what Khaled Hosseini wants to remind us. And Hosseini has a Dickensian knack of storytelling. The novel is never boring. We feel like keep on reading it. And he uses certain native Afghan words like harami, kalashnikov, etc. in the novel. And I read first novel of Hosseini, also The Kite Runner, and I feel the 1,000 Splendid Suns is better than Kite Runner. The Kite Runner is obviously a wonderful novel, but then I feel this one is better because Kite Runner talks more about men, the friendship between men and the relationship between men, and this book focuses more on the relationship between women. I'm not a feminist, but still I could relate more with the book. And another book which I could relate the book with was R.S. Walker's Color Purple. The storyline differs, but the relationship concept, it is same in the Color Purple also. And I would rate the book 4 out of 5, probably because I am a strict judge. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. Before we move on to our next presentation, I would like to welcome Dr. S. Armstrong, Professor and Head, Department of English, University of Madras, in our midst. We welcome you, sir. The next presenter of the day will be Irene Shilpa S., who will be doing a book review of The Cross and the Switchblade by David Wilkerson.
A warm good morning to all present here. The title of my book is The Cross and the Switchblade, and I got this book as a gift from my friend, but it was on my shelf for a long time, but then I got a chance to go through this. So, to tell about the author of the book, his name is David Wilkerson. He was a pastor, he was a countryside pastor, and this book is very famous. It has been sold for almost 15 million copies all around the world, and it is also considered as a Christian classic. So I suggest everyone to go through this book at least once in your lifetime, because this book is completely life transforming, and it totally changes your perception towards what is life and what is the hope you have for your life. And I was pretty much impressed with the stories narrated in the book. It's always told from the first person point of view. It's autobiographical. And there's no plot as such, because the author tells about all his experiences. He was a countryside pastor, and then the story begins when he was reading a magazine. He was impressed by listening a story about a gang murderers in the city of New York. So when we think of New York, we imagine the city is bright, accelerating, perfect, and everything is like beautiful. But that's a general assumption. But when we read this book, we get to know the darker side of the New York City in the 1950s, where we find the reality deals with the boys and girls, teenagers and youngsters involving in murders, criminals, and we find prostitutes, we find all kind of lower class of the society, the people who are mostly stricken with poverty and violence. And they didn't have any hope, they didn't have any future, and there was no person to come for the rescue. And now here we find the author going to rescue them, and he deals with so many different kinds of people. And one interesting character was Nicky Cruz, and he was a person who was totally changed by David Wilkerson. And towards the end of the book we find he also becomes a preacher. And there was one touching instant in the book which I read. Like when David Wilkerson encountered the gangsters in New York, once he was preaching about Jesus and about the cross, the whole gangsters were just staring at him. And he didn't mind of the gangsters, but he just went on preaching. And towards the end, when all the gangsters came to kill him and attack him, he said this, "You cut me up into 1,000 pieces and lay them in the street, and every piece will still love you." So hearing this, the gangsters couldn't react anymore. And even I was so much inspired, like how a person could show and demonstrate unconditional love to an outcast. And the relevance of the title, we can find the cross and the switchblade. Of course, this is the journey of the author through life and death, and his venture is extremely wild, and like no one can imagine this. And another thing which I liked in the book is that though it was written 50 years ago, we can find all the things which is narrated in the book. It's so much relevant to our current day society. Like even today we find the role of violence, we find loneliness, we find abandonment, addictions, and there is a deep wanting in each and every one of us to belong to something, and this still plays out in this society. And we get to understand more about these issues in the novel. And so after reading this, I got a positive impact that we can also change the world for better, and there's nothing called which is impossible, and through God, so all things are possible. So, and this was a completely faith-building story, and where we find the gangsters turning out into ministers, we find the fighters turning out into soldiers, we find the lonesome for being loved, and they find their identity in their life. So this book still continues to inspire faith among thousands of people, and we have faith in God that God can even change the impossible, and which we can't resolve. So the author is no more, but still his life is a great inspiration. and it's exemplary, and which urges us that we should also impact our society through God or something which is in us. And this is a phenomenal life story where where we can find that there is surely a light in the end of all the dismal tunnels in our life. So there is hope and there is brighter future, and I would like to rate 10 out of 10 because I don't want to compare this book with anything because it is so uniquely powerful and life transforming. So I would like to suggest all of you to read this. Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. Now over to Dr. Armstrong and Dr. Ann Thomas for their comments. Now over to our next presenter of the day, Ms. Jayashree Rajan of First MA English, who will be doing a book review of Asura by Anand Neelakantan.
Hey everyone. I've chosen this book, Asura by Anand Neelakantan. Basically, I was not someone who was very interested in mythology, but somehow one of my professors, he gave me this book and he just told me to give it a try, and I don't regret it. It was one of the best books I've ever read, I wish. This book gave me a cultural shock, actually. The first time I read this book was, coincidentally, it was the Shera. We can actually, just because this is about Ravana, the author has actually coined a beautiful term called Ramayana. So just because Rama deals with Ramayana, so this is about Ravana, and it has a beautiful dual narration, and it has two narrators, two protagonists, Ravana and Bhadra, and both the characters depict almost the same incident in their own way according to their thinking. That shows the difference between the point of rich and poor. Ravana, he represents the elite, and Bhadra, he represents the poor. Ravana describes about his feelings and his ambitions from a teenager's point of view initially, and then further describes about the problems of handling an entire empire from a ruler's point of view, while Bhadra, who represents a commoners, sees things from a poor person's perspective. The novel being about Asuras doesn't mean that the author has gone to the extent of glorifying Asuras or the demon group, I suppose. But in fact, I appreciate the way the author has beautifully depicted the good and bad sides of both the sides, and the things that make the story of this novel, different from other mythological books is that the author has dared to exclude the good side of Asuras and emancipate the evil that was prevalent in Deva society. Ever since childhood, we are of the notion that Asuras are all about the bad and Devas are all about the good. But once I read this book, it was that's what I said when I said I got a cultural shock when I read this book. It is a very controversial book. The author was really tainted for this, but I personally really liked it because I'm someone who had all this, had an opinion about mythological books. That's why I always stayed away from it. I always thought that our mythological books were written from a very biased point of view, and so basically what is very interesting about this book is that the author has a very strong and audacious, he has given a very strong and audacious challenge to those old set notions and convictions of both sides, and both sides are depicted as human civilization. There's